So who's providing for those children? And my personal theory is Katie was sort of a ghost employee for the Adelson practice down in South Florida. And my hunch is that it's in some way, shape, or form, her silence might be connected to the welfare of her children.
Welcome to a special edition of Surviving the Survivor. The Dan Markel murder with Carm on Crime.
So, Carm, for those listening, maybe a day later, today is July 29th, 4 days after my 53rd birthday. Happy birthday to me. And just a few days before your 83rd birthday. By the way, my birthday falls on your anniversary. If you forgot, so happy anniversary as well. But it is more importantly, arguably, a bigger day because today, both Katie Magbanua and Charlie Adelson appeared inside a Tallahassee courtroom. We were not there, and neither were our guests, but our guests have been all over this case from the beginning. Let me introduce you to them right now. One is one of the most formidable attorneys in the United States of America. He, of course, is John D. Singer. He is a Georgetown University Law Center grad, former Proskauer Rose attorney. He is now a co-founder and partner with Singer Deutsch. He was designated as a New York super lawyer for, as I said last time, too many years to count, but beginning in 2009. He makes regular appearances now on Surviving the Survivor, but also on a little-known cable company called CNBC and some other news outlets that don't matter. He negotiates multi-million-dollar employment deals and also happens to be a diehard New England Patriots football fan. He is from the great city of Newton, Mass. Why are you pointing a finger at me?
Because you forgot to mention that he's a world expert on the Dan Markel case.
He's also a world expert on. I was going to say something, Carm, but then I remembered our viewers are watching this, and they have a tendency to defend you. Okay. So I'll be very, very nice. And then joining us last moment, and we cannot thank him enough, is Preston Scott. And you'll know that he is a radio guy when you hear his voice. He works for iHeartMedia out of Tallahassee, Florida, as well as WFLA. He hosts the morning show from 6 to 9. He's been doing it since 2002. So it goes without saying that he has been all over the Dan Markel case since the very beginning. And again, we cannot thank him enough for joining us short notice. Thanks to one and all. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And Preston, let's start with you. Were you able to watch, obviously, Katie Magbanua? Her sentencing was just a few hours ago. Were you able to watch? What did you find out? Were you surprised by anything?
Well, I didn't get to watch it, but at this point, obviously, everybody knows what's happened. She's been sentenced to, in essence, life without possibility of probation or parole, and then an additional 60 years on top of that. Doesn't surprise me in the slightest. The only thing that I would say is surprising is I actually thought there might be an opportunity that she would provide some information relative to the Adelson family, specifically Charlie. I have my own theories on why that didn't happen. But the bottom line is the ended sentence, the verdict, and then the sentence doesn't surprise me at all.
And obviously, same question for you, John. What stood out, if anything, about this sentencing today?
Oh, it was really kind of a confluence of emotions. Shelley Markel, Dan Markel's sister, provided a really compelling victim statement. The Markels are obviously an incredibly intelligent family. We've all heard Ruth speak now and Phil, and it's the first time I heard Shelley speak at length, and she really spoke very poignantly about her brother, how much he meant to her, how much she's at a loss as to why this happened, and how many holidays and family events that will be not the same without Dan. So that was a very powerful and very emotionally charged victim statement. But as far as Katie, I spoke last with you and Carmen. I indicated that I didn't think there was any deal forthcoming. The government has spent God knows how many hours preparing for the two trials. taxpayer money. Anyone who's a lawyer knows whether it's civil, criminal, state, federal, a trial is an all-encompassing endeavor for the litigators involved. And there were 6 years that Katie had to cooperate. She didn't. I didn't think Kappelman would give her any sort of a deal. And we don't even know if Katie even attempted during the intervening period between the guilty verdict and today to even reach out to the prosecutor's office. But if they had, what could she offer at this point? Her testimony would be worthless because she has no credibility. They have, I think, the goods on Charlie. Everybody knows Charlie orchestrated this. So unless she had something particular to Wendy, I don't think there was anything for her to even offer that would have gotten her a lesser charge.
Preston said that he has a theory.
And you know what, Carm? That was my exact thought. Great minds think alike. Preston, what was your theory, and why did you think that maybe she would cooperate?
Well, I actually didn't think she would. I think the compelling reason in my mind that hasn't been discussed an awful lot, but I think is very relevant, and I'd be fascinated to get John's take on this, is her children. You know, at this point, the children's father is spending the rest of his life behind bars. So who's providing for those children? And my personal theory is Katie was sort of a ghost employee for the Adelson practice down in South Florida. And my hunch is that it's in some way, shape, or form, her silence might be connected to the welfare of her children. Obviously, that is purely conjecture. But the bottom line is the Adelsons have remarkable resources and would be in a position to ensure that those children would be provided for in some way, shape, or form, should she not provide cooperation. But I think John's right. As an aside, even though I do what I do for a living, which is talk about the news, I served on a Leon County grand jury for 6 months several years ago. And every single one of those cases was a capital murder case. And in my opinion, with the number of cases that I personally saw over 6 months, there was so much evidence, circumstantial as it may be, in this case against not just the threes, the one that pled, Luis Rivera, Sigfredo Garcia, and Katie Magbanua, but I think the evidence against Charlie Adelson and his mom is overwhelming.
And John, just to follow up, because Preston wanted your take on it. We talked about it briefly last time, but again, do you agree with him as to why Katie didn't necessarily flip? That maybe there's kind of a follow the money situation going on here?
I thought that initially because it really made no sense that between the time that she was arrested in October of 16 and her first trial in 19 and then her second trial in 22, that she had never flipped on Charlie. It was obviously orchestrated by Charlie with her assistance, primarily, in my opinion, for Donna, secondarily for Wendy. But clearly she knew that Charlie was involved and never once gave him up. That, to me, indicated that there was some financial recompense from her or her children via the Adelsons. But as I thought about it even more, that if there were any sort of a deal that the Adelsons had made with her and had promised some sort of financial pot of gold at the end of the day, that's certainly not enforceable. Who's going to enforce that now? Is Katie going to somehow hire, another lawyer to go after the Adelsons and say you breached your contract because you stopped funding the trust? At this point, Charlie's going to go to prison, likely for the rest of his life. Donna's likely to follow. Harvey is, approaching 80. Who is going to hold the Adelsons to that binding contract, if you will? So at one point, I thought it was the money. Now I think it might be an issue of pride and hubris and not wanting her children to somehow be besmirched by some sort of an admission on her part. Yes, she's been found guilty, but she's always maintained her innocence. Maybe that's what's driving her. It's very hard for me to come up with something other than the money. But at this point, I don't think there is any sort of, contractual obligation on behalf of the Adelson.
Our viewers are awesome. And, there's a lot of comments, and I was looking through them last night, and pride came up quite a bit as a reason. So perhaps that is the case. Carmela, you had your hand raised on your own show.
No, going back to the money. it's illegal, right? So it's illegal. So she runs the risk of putting herself in for a lifetime, and then the money is discovered that it was done, like somebody said, offshore or in some other illegal way, and then besides the family is so dishonorable. Where is where can you trust them if they say to you that they will put in 100,000? And by the way, 100,000 will not go too far raising two children. So, and the pride, I also could put holes in the pride, because she did a lot of things in her life where pride did not play a role. She distorted reality. She did things that apparently she was a college graduate, but she did this. I don't know if she was ever doing anything like prostitution. I never heard of that, but she certainly worked in very shady places. She teamed up with shady characters. I don't know.
Anderson Cooper, I'm going to cut you off there. It takes Anderson Cooper and my mom 7 news cycles to get the question out.
I like
sometimes.
to make speeches. Sorry.
It amazes me, as a quick aside, I was watching Anderson Cooper last night. God bless his soul, because he's making a hell of a lot more money than me. The guy takes 23 minutes to get a question out after all these years. It's unbelievable. Preston, do you buy this pride issue?
I probably wouldn't go to pride. I would probably, after the money thing, I would follow desperation. I would follow maybe a little naivety. Clearly, and I think John might agree with me, but Charlie Adelson's arrogance was his biggest downfall in this whole thing. In terms of, if you're trying to not get caught. The audio tapes are so remarkably incriminating, even without the most recent audio tape that apparently they had help with, either from the CIA or Secret Service, scrubbing it and cleaning it up a little bit. But as far as Katie goes, I don't know what she was thinking or what she has been thinking, but like I said, desperation can make people make a lot of really silly decisions.
John, before we move on to Charlie, 2 quick questions for you. So these victim impact statements, in general, is the sentencing already decided prior to this? And then what is the purpose of these victim impact statements? And also, what you talked about, how Shelley spoke really well, Dan's sister. What is there any part of that stood out to you today?
So to answer your first question, when it's mandatory life sentence, which this is here because she was convicted of first degree murder, the victim statements don't have any really ramifications for what the sentencing is going to be. So if the judge had discretion as to what to give her as far as a sentence, then the victim statements can certainly sway the judge in one way or another. When it's mandatory life, the victim statements are not relevant per se. She asked, Tara Kawas asked today that the 2 other charges that didn't carry mandatory life, that those would be less than 30 years and they'd run concurrently. Maybe the victim statements could have helped in that regard, but the judge had at that point had made up his mind and wasn't going to give her any sort of an optics or visceral break. Again, it wouldn't have mattered because she already has mandatory life on the first degree murder charge. But I guess she was looking for some sort of Pyrrhic victory by hoping that those other charges didn't carry concurrent sentencing as opposed to consecutive. As far as Shelley goes, we hadn't heard much from her. We've heard a lot from Ruth as of late because the book is coming out, The Unveiling, which I'm really looking forward to reading. I ordered my copy on Amazon, pre-ordered. We heard her on your show. We've heard her on others, and she's been amazing. We've heard a little bit from Phil, but from Shelley, nothing earth-shattering, but just, again, the courage and the poise that she exhibited today. If it were me, if it were you, if it were Carm, I'm sure if it were Preston, we'd all be so angry, and we'd be expressing our anger at the Adelsons. We're not sitting there in court. So she did it by Zoom from Canada. She wasn't in court. So there was no one who could have held her in contempt for, pointing the finger at the Adelsons. And just that restraint that she exhibited, to me, was remarkable, because I think any of us, just our base instinct is anger at that point. And we probably would have said things about the Adelsons that would have gotten us in trouble, but she didn't do that. She was right on point to how much the family missed Dan, how much she had looked up to him as a little brother, how much she had helped with the parents to steer him in the right direction. And just her own memories about Dan were very powerful, and nothing that we hadn't known already. We knew he was a connector with people, a wonderful son, brother, father, very, very agile and brilliant legal mind. And she amplified all those topics. But just the way in which she delivered it with such grace and such poise, really very resonant of Ruth, and a very powerful impact statement.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, what we would all expect from the Markel family. Preston, you talk about Charlie's arrogance. His downfall, you think?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there are so many incriminating things that he said. There's the relationship, obviously, with Katie is such a connect the dots type thing. I mean, you fundamentally look at this. There is zero reason on this side of eternity for Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera to find themselves in Tallahassee. And everything from the cell phone pinging to the videotape of Tallahassee buses to a neighbor seeing a car speed away after hearing gunshots to the placement of the car on the interstate system and the toll booths. And when it's all said and done, there's only one possibility that those two guys are here, and it's Katie Magbanua. And the only possibility Katie Magbanua tells them to come to Tallahassee goes to Charlie Adelson. I mean, I'm fascinated to get John's take because he's an attorney. But to me, this was for a guy who's allegedly the maestro, license plate, not making that up. He has maestro on his license plate. I can't think of anybody that could have orchestrated this and been so remarkably dumb about doing it.
Well, I just want to pick up on that, because here's the really interesting part of it. So when the FBI did the bump in the spring of 2016, where they handed Donna a piece of paper and they pretended that they were a member of the Rivera family, basically what they said during the bump was, look, you've been helping Sigfredo, but you haven't been helping Rivera. They used the names Chucho and Tato, which were their nicknames.
Their nicknames, yeah.
They were basically, the person from the FBI pretended to be the brother of Luis Rivera. And Donna immediately calls Charlie and says, someone handed me something, it involves the two of us. That right there is going to sink the two of them, both Charlie and Donna. But Charlie was savvy enough, if you will, to understand that may have been the FBI. And he also knew from that point on that his phone line was being tapped. He knew that. And he knew at Dolce Vita that it was a possibility that someone was listening, because he says over and over again, and by the way, this was part of his filing last night in court, that his attorney Rashbaum asking Charlie to be released from prison early. He says on that Dolce Vita recording, I had nothing to do with it. I don't know who did this. But then, and so clearly he thought people were listening. But during other parts of that taped Dolce Vita conversation, he makes these horrific admissions. He says that if they had the evidence, we'd be at the airport right away. And then he says other things during the course of that 40-minute enhanced recording that are going to do him in at his trial in 23. So he knew they were listening. He was astute enough to know that they were listening, and he made certain statements that were exculpatory because he knew they were listening. But then on the same exact recording during the same Dolce Vita meeting with Katie, he makes what we would call inculpatory comments. So arrogance, bravado, I'd even add stupidity.
Right.
Very stupid, some of the things he did when he knew they were listening to him.
Carm.
John, if I can I ask another question here, John? I'm assuming you got a chance to watch the closing arguments in the Magbanua trial by Georgia Kaplan.
I did.
Obviously, sitting as a grand juror, I've had a lot of time around Georgia Kaplan. She's a very methodical, very thorough prosecutor. I was blown away when she dropped Wendy Adelson's name in her closing arguments, suggesting that there was some kind of code established with Charlie using a television. First, did that stand out to you? And secondly, your reaction to it?
Well, I think that, from the get-go, from the first Magbanua trial, the trial against Garcia and Magbanua in October of 19, in her opening statement, which was phenomenal, and Georgia Kaplan is an incredible prosecutor, as is her colleague Sarah Dugan. They did such phenomenal work, Georgia on both trials, and then Sarah on the second trial. But Georgia laid out in her opening statement in the 2019 trial her theory of the case, which involved perhaps Wendy's knowledge. I mean, she never said straight out Wendy knew. In 2022, for the first time, Wendy was indicated to be a co-conspirator. Wendy's name had never been used in that vein by Kaplan or by anyone else other than all of us who knew Wendy or thought Wendy may have had involvement, and that evolved for a lot of us over time. But in early 22, Kaplan lays out that Wendy was in fact a co-conspirator. But getting back to your original question, yes, it did stand out to me in her closing. She's evolved too with her allusion to Wendy. It's becoming a little bit hotter each time around. Wendy's, and they're getting a little bit closer to Wendy each go around.
John, since you are since you're the attorney, the Arthur hearing.
Yeah, I have a question.
What's your question, Carm?
Before the Arthur hearing.
Go for it.
Okay, I know about the Arthur hearing was today, and it was not today, but it was today. It was discussed if they will approve of him going on bail, right?
Yes. So last night, and I have my theory on this, and I think it's a sound one, but last night, for the very first time, Charlie Adelson requested an Arthur hearing. So he hadn't requested one from April 21st, which is when he was, I believe, it was either April 20th or 21st, when he was indicted, until last evening. The Arthur hearing was discussed today during the case management hearing, and it was agreed upon that it would take place within 30 to 60 days. So that's when the Arthur hearing will actually take place.
And John, you're the attorney, but we're not. So for those who don't know, explain what an Arthur hearing is.
So Charlie Adelson has requested a hearing to determine whether or not he should be free from prison during the pendency of his criminal case. So he's asked in his pleading last night, and I read the pleading or his motion, he's asked for a hearing, and he's articulated various grounds as to why he should be sprung from prison pending his 2023 trial. And the Arthur hearing will take place, and it's short. It's going to be either in the morning or in the afternoon, Georgia Kaplan said. There'll likely be one or two witnesses and some attorney argument to determine if he should be free or not.
Is there any chance he gets out?
But may I? My question is related to this. He mentioned during this appeal that he could have left the country on multiple occasions. Did you hear it, Preston?
Yeah, that was the
because
point.
Because Preston moved away. The question was, why didn't he leave the country? He was out of the country on multiple occasions, and he came back. And this also doesn't make any sense to me. He could have gone to a country and that extraditions are not in existence, or that etc., etc.
Carm's on fire today, grunting, cutting me off, asking 47-minute questions. You really brought your A game today, Carm. Just asked, Preston, can you please answer Carmela's query about taking off and getting out of the country?
This is all happening because we have these 2 sessions, one back to back.
Carm, I'm the one that's supposed to complain, not you. Go on, Preston.
Well, I would, there's an old expression about stupidity. If people think you're stupid, why open your mouth and remove all doubt, right? I would sort of borrow from that and suggest that, Charlie coming back and forth, that's his way, in my opinion, of parading his innocence and trying to proclaim himself as, I don't have any fears, I don't have any worries. But as John alluded to, there are so many statements he's made on tape, so many phone recordings. I would submit phone recordings to even attorneys that have been made public that incriminate him. But I'm going to throw this out there and let you all react to this, because I would be shocked if you've heard any of what I'm about to share. One of the things that has been rumored about here, and I'll just simply state that I have sources, and one of the sources has told me that the FBI is aware that there are plans that were put in place for Charlie and perhaps the 2 senior Adelsons to leave the country using private charter services, and that the FBI has recordings on these airplanes. I don't know if that's true or not, but obviously if there is any truth to that, it would then explain, in my opinion, sort of going back to what John was just talking about, why after all this time try to get this hearing and try to get released. In my opinion, Charlie is throwing a Hail Mary because he knows the case is done.
John, you're the attorney. How does that change the game if the FBI does in fact have evidence that he's prepping to take off?
Oh, well, that would be very problematic for Charlie, although if you remember from the second most interesting case, this would be the first, O.J. Simpson would be the second. In the O.J. Simpson case, you all remember the Bronco chase. That was deemed to be not admissible in that trial. So if you recall, Judge Ito did not allow the evidence of the Bronco chase to be admissible because that would be deemed to be too prejudicial. So that would be a very interesting evidentiary point if Charlie were planning on leaving, whether that would even be admissible. But what Carm said was fascinating because I think, in my opinion, after reading last night's papers, firstly, let me get this out of the way that Charlie's not getting out of prison, because the optics of that, just think of the optics of keeping in Katie Magbanua for 5.5 years. She got arrested in 2016. She didn't get convicted of anything until 2022. She's detained in prison, and Charlie Adelson's going to get out. There's no way optically they're letting him out. But he made 2 very, very good arguments last night in his papers. The first argument was what Carm was alluding to, which is he traveled frequently. He went after the probable cause affidavit was released in 2016, where the police wanted him arrested and they believed they had enough to arrest him. Pending the state attorney's office decision, that was their ultimate decision not to. But even after that was made public, he went to Thailand, he went to the Philippines twice, Spain, Croatia, St. Martin, several of those in South Korea, several of those countries, and Carm alluded to this as well, do not have extradition treaties with the United States if it's a capital offense you're being charged with. So if you can be charged with a death penalty, you will not be extradited from those countries. And Charlie went to several of those countries and came back. So the attorney Rashbaum's argument on his point is, look, he's not a flight risk. If he went to any of these countries that didn't have an extradition treaty vis-a-vis the death penalty, then he would have stayed, but he didn't. The other argument, and by the way, I heard on your show that Georgia Cappleman said that they're not going to be seeking the death penalty with respect to Charlie, same as Katie. They tried it with Garcia, they didn't get it, so they didn't seek it vis-a-vis Katie. They're not going to do it with Charlie. But the fact is, at the time when he went to these countries, death was on the table for him. So that's one argument. The other argument he made, and the reason I think he waited, Rushbaum, to file his papers until last night, was the legal standard for an Arthur hearing is that there's no direct evidence that Rushbaum is claiming against Charlie. It's all theory, it's all conjecture, it's all circumstantial. I think they were waiting to see if Katie flipped. And if she did, then there'd be direct evidence, if you will. It wouldn't have been evidence yet, but it would have been direct link to Charlie. And what they said in their papers is neither Garcia, Rivera, or Katie ever have stated that Charlie did this. And Katie said on the witness stand, well, after hearing everything, I think he did, but she never said specifically that Charlie enlisted me. So I think they were waiting till the very end, right before Katie's hearing at 9 o'clock this morning, to see if she actually flipped. And the fact that she didn't gave them some legal artillery to make their motion that they made last night. Again, he's not getting out. There's no way he's getting out. But I think that gave them a pretty good argument to make in their papers.
You hear that, Wendy and Donna? They're not getting out.
Okay.
Carm, you've got your hand raised.
Okay. So Charlie had the opportunity to disappear, and anybody else I would have disappeared. Okay. I think it's his hubris that kept him here. I don't know what else could. Maybe Preston, or maybe
I'm
you.
no shrink, but it was what Preston has said. He's so arrogant, he probably didn't think he was going to get cuffed and brought into jail. What do you think, Preston?
That's stupidity.
Well, he said he's stupid too. But Preston, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I personally think that the case speaks for itself with regard to that. I think the evidence speaks to that. I would, and I don't disagree with anything John said, and he clearly has far more legal acumen than I would then I would just posit that perhaps he went to some of these countries that do not have an extradition treaty agreement with the United States just to kind of see the lay of the land, check it out. I mean, I'm just throwing that as a possibility. Of all the places to go visit, just seems interesting. He visited a bunch of places where they don't have extradition agreements.
He was sightseeing. Preston, I'm curious. You've been covering the case from the get-go. We have a rabid following. We love them. Shout out to Fancy Fiction, Got Donuts, Maui Swift, all these people that follow us. And we're going to get into some viewer comments in a moment. But why? What is it about this case you think that has gripped these people's attention so fiercely?
Oh my goodness. This case is I mean, I don't mean this in a trivial, trite kind of way. This is a made-for-TV motion picture kind of thing. I mean, you've got a marriage gone wrong. You've got the family that hates. You've got the twist of the changing of the last name of the children and the virtual erasure of their father. The unwillingness of the custodial mother to allow the grandparents to see their grandchildren. Every aspect of this case. And then there's just the reality. Dan Markel was murdered 5 minutes from my studio. Mm-hmm. It happened in a very suburban, nice kind of upscale neighborhood. Not a wealthy, super uber rich neighborhood, but a very nice neighborhood. Dan, Florida State University and Florida A&M University, they are Tallahassee. Those schools are this town. And so anything that happens to anybody related to FSU, it matters. It just does. And I think all of the subplots of this just add up to a story, and you just find yourself saying, really? Here? Yeah. In Tallahassee?
Interesting. I mean, not surprising, but interesting. So John's given us his take, but I'm curious, do you think that Donna is the next domino to fall, and then Wendy, perhaps?
Well, I'd be curious. Again, I'm sorry to keep bombing here on John, but does Charlie cut a deal to keep Donna out of prison? to keep Donna from being arrested. I'm just curious because, or does Georgia even want that kind of deal? I don't know. I think that's the only thing that might speed this up. Is Charlie just saying, "Yeah, you got me," and being done with it to keep Donna out of prison?
I didn't think there was any possibility he would turn on her, and then after his case management hearing this morning, where the sides would like a trial in the first quarter of 23, it certainly appears full steam ahead. And I think going back to what you said, Preston, about the arrogance and the bravado that Charlie projects and that really encapsulates his whole persona, I still am of the belief that as strong as the evidence is, that he believes that he is going to win this case. I think that his whole life, he's certainly been coddled, entitled. If you listen to him wax on those wiretaps about every subject, ranging from steroids to insider trading to real estate, he knows everything about everything. And I think he believes that if he gets up there on the witness stand, he is going to get the better of these Tallahassee prosecutors, who, by the way, as I said earlier, are phenomenal. And he's delusive in that sense. And I think that he believes at the end of the day, he's going to prevail. And I think he's made plans for his post acquittal life. I think that I'm not sure which woman he's with right now. If he's going to go back with June Mshinda, stranger things have happened. She's certainly still in love with him. But I think he's made plans, and I think he is assuming that he is going to get out of prison. That's my opinion.
John, I can tell you for certain that Charlie does not know everything about everything, because the only person that actually knows everything about everything is to my right, my mother, the only one.
I hoped he would say that.
In our last podcast, she was offering up financial advice to the employee at Burger King for 27 years who's coming into $300,000 as a donation. But I digress. So, Preston, I mean, you talked about, anything in Tallahassee obviously is going to reverberate. Has kind of interest in the case snowballed as these proceedings continue to happen?
Absolutely. Yeah. The arrests, clearly the pleading by Rivera, the trial of Garcia, but everybody, there is, I've never talked to a soul in this community going back to shortly after the murder happened. There are events in Tallahassee called Downtown Get Downs, and they are before every Florida State football game. And within a few weeks of the murder of Dan Markel, it was being discussed, and the question was being asked, how soon before the Adelson family is implicated? And so that, to me, this is the part of the trial that now, or of the case, that everyone's attention is going to be focused. To me, this is where we're going to really see the community just kind of pay very close attention. Everything up until now was kind of, yeah, let's get to the Adelsons. Because again, there's just, in my opinion, there's no plausible deniability of the Adelson involvement in this assassination of Professor Markel.
We got to get Carm to the Downtown Get Down. John, one of the questions you thought would be interesting to pose, which I appreciate because you and I spoke offline. What's next for Wendy based upon the quote-unquote interesting testimony that she gave in both trials? What do you think is next legally?
So Wendy, I think Wendy, Preston, I think you would agree, is certainly the harder one. Donna is certainly easier in the sense that the wiretaps are very damning for her. The sequencing of events after the bump, her admission or her statement to Charlie that this involves the two of us, the vitriol that she had harbored for Dan in the emails that had been produced at trial that Wendy had to testify about, where Donna called Danny every name under the sun. The fact that there was a motion pending at the time of his death for her to no longer have supervised visitation with the children because of all the disparaging things they said about Dan. So I don't think the case against her is particularly hard. It's a lot of it's circumstantial. Wendy is the interesting one, because you have to think that Georgia Kappelman wants to get Wendy in prison. You have to think that's the case. She knows the type of person Wendy is. She heard the testimony from Jeffrey Lacoste about Wendy's bizarre queries of Lacoste about when he was leaving for Tennessee on the day of the murder, which of course was concurrent with the murder taking place. So it seems certainly like she wanted to frame him. Right now, I do not believe they have enough to charge her with. I don't believe it. So I think most people who thought she wasn't involved initially have evolved to the point where they believe she certainly was. The question is, what further evidence can they garner to charge her? Because right now, I believe they have enough to charge Donna. I do not believe they have enough to charge Wendy. So something's going to have to give. Whether Magbanua decides to eventually cooperate and she knows something about Wendy, that's not going to help her at this point, but maybe it helps the prosecution get Wendy. I don't think Charlie is going to turn on his sister or his mother. I don't think that's within the realm of possibility. So Wendy, at the end of the day, as hard it is to fathom for all of us who follow this case and want to see her in prison, she may walk at the end of the day. Preston, I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I just don't think right now they have enough with which to charge her.
Yeah, I would agree, John. I think that, she's guilty of making some really weird choices on what she did the day of the murder, where she was. And some of her statements afterwards are at best just remarkably callous, and at worst make you question, but I don't think they have very much either. I think she's got probably plausible deniability, to borrow that phrase. But John, do you think you talked about Charlie not rolling, and I completely agree. But my question is there ever a scenario with a prosecutor that you're aware of where someone like Charlie would say, okay, I will sit down and discuss this with you, drop the case against my mother, make certain there's nothing against my sister?
No. I mean, if he's going to cooperate, I think that he could actually get himself a better deal. Not a great deal, but I think he can get a better deal if he were to turn on Wendy, not Donna. Because I think at the end of the day, they have enough on Donna. They don't have enough on Wendy. And I think
I'm not talking about turning on him. I'm talking about him just taking, in other words, going the opposite of what you think. And I agree with you. He thinks he's going to get away with this. But what if just strange things happen when you're sitting in a cell? And I'm just curious, what if he said, okay, I'm willing to cooperate with you and tell you what I've done, but I want the case against my mother to be dropped?
I don't think that it just depends on what he had to offer. I mean, if he gives up Wendy on a silver platter, could Georgia Kappelman strike a deal with him and then agree not to go after Donna? Possibly. That's a possibility. If it were hard and fast and he had actual evidence of Wendy and there were some sort of communications out there, he may be able to save Donna, get a lesser sentence for himself, and skewer Wendy. That is a possibility. But I don't believe it's going to happen. I don't think you do either.
I tend to agree with you.
I put myself in the mind of Donna. I don't think Donna would be overjoyed if her brilliant daughter is thrown under the bus to save her. Then all three of her children are gone, and she's sitting there with the old husband with the cancer and watching the three of them go in marching into a jail cell.
So you don't want to see Charlie give up Wendy to save Donna?
No.
During the court battle, during the divorce proceeding, she was writing some scathing emails to Wendy about how you need to put on the performance of a lifetime.
Right.
The whole point being that we need relocation to occur. And one of her points Donna made was that the Adelsons don't lose. And I think there's a certain mentality there that Tallahassee is Tallahassee. We're wealthy South Miami people. We're going to win. I think that they are not. I think they're nervous. I think she's nervous as can be. I think Wendy is in a whole different state of mind. I don't think she's sitting there worried about getting arrested. because you listen to her testimony. It's so arrogant. It really mirrors Charlie's. Don is petrified. But I do think that Charlie and the family have agreed that he is going to go to trial and he's going to win. That's what they think. They really do believe that. And I think they're going to be wrong at the end of the day, but I think that's their mindset right now.
So, John, basically, they discussed Charlie's attorneys and the state that the trial will begin sometime in January 23. You believe that this trial could be kicked down the field a little bit. When do you think we see the beginning of Charlie's trial?
Yeah, so they were talking today that the attorneys had agreed that they would look at calendars for January to March of 23 and that they would need 3 weeks this time, not 2. And the prosecutor, Georgia Kappelman, said that it was a little tight, the 2 weeks during the Magbanua trial, so they need 3. I think that they may have good intentions of going forward in Q1 of 23, but trials get kicked all the time. Discovery comes in late. Things happen. Magbanua's trial got kicked over and over again. Part of it was COVID, but there were other reasons as well. I think it's going to take place sometime in Q2 or maybe the summer of 23. I think January to March is a little bit overly optimistic.
And then with those who are riveted by this case, can they expect, high drama between now and the summer potentially of 2023? Are we going to see a complete lull now, or is there always something coming down the pike, the proverbial pike?
I think it's going to be, there's going to be a lull. There's going to be the Arthur hearing, which should take place in 30 to 60 days. That will be a morning or afternoon event. And I think that's the motion's going to get denied for him to be sprung from prison. Other than that, there'll be case management hearings, and maybe Donna gets indicted in the interim, maybe. Other than that, I don't know what other fireworks, could take place. Donna's the wild card, because again, when Magbanua went on trial for the second time in May of 22, everybody was waiting for that, and then boom, Charlie gets arrested on April 20th, and nobody saw that coming. I think the prosecution had to do that for optics purposes. They had to have him sitting in prison to take away that argument from Magbanua's lawyers that this is sort of it's a financial thing or it's a stratospheric thing. Charlie's sitting out there free and Katie's in prison. They almost had to do it. That would be the only wild card I think that would occur prior to trial.
And Preston, do you agree with that? Do you think is there a possibility that we would see the indictment of Donna or potentially even Wendy between now and when Charlie's trial starts? You think there's any chance, Preston?
I don't think there's much of a chance. As I've watched the arc of this case, it seems as though every time that we kind of think, uh-oh, what's going to happen here? Something happens. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's something that we find out about that is remarkably incriminating that the prosecution has. But I tend to agree with John that it's going to get real quiet. And I think it's going to be very unnerving to Charlie.
I keep thinking about that. If I'm Wendy or I'm Donna, Charlie's already in jail, but if I'm Donna or Wendy, I am taking a lot of Valium right now because I am not feeling comfortable. So we have an awesome viewership here, as John quickly learned. People were diving on John in the comment section, telling me he didn't know what he was talking about. Meanwhile, John's one of the more successful attorneys out there. So if you guys would allow me, I've got some viewer comments here. We could just do a kind of a lightning round. I'm going to go through some of the comments and get each of your takes. And Carmela, your take too. You're part of the show. So
thank you.
Jason says, momentum is such that Donna and Wendy are next. John, my question to you, in the legal world, is there such a thing as momentum? You get one person, then another person. Does the state start to feel that momentum?
No, I think there's momentum intra-trial. There's certain peaks and valleys. You get a little momentum going. But I don't think the sequencing or the moment, we got Magbanua. Now we're going to go get Don. I don't think so.
I need to digress. I need to digress a minute. I can't help it. I can't help it.
Carm,
It's
honestly,
like,
my
it's in
biggest,
my nature.
my biggest.
But I have to tell you this. This hubris thing fascinates me. As a psychologist, it fascinates me. And you know, and this is not a political statement, but Clinton with the Monica Lewinsky, Nixon with taping himself. These people just assume that they can get away with it, that it will never happen to them.
You forgot a guy named Donald Trump, but go on.
I am not getting closer to
I am. Go on. Go on.
No. The point, and I took a Democrat, I took a Republican. My point is that it's a psychologically fascinating thing. Hubris is psychologically, because those people really think that they can walk on water, and they really think that they can literally, and there is an expression in the English language, they can get away with murder. So this is, to me, fascinating. This is something psychologically fascinating. And I think all the Adelsons suffer from this, not only Charlie. I mean, I don't know Harvey, but Dana and Wendy also think that they are not vulnerable.
As we go through these comments, I'm terrified that my poor mother is going to get slaughtered this week. And I may as well, because they're going to say I was being mean to her. Preston, on to you. Tiffany says, I think Robert will testify against his family, which will lend to the type of character they have. Do you agree, Preston?
No.
John is shaking his head no.
I was wondering if someone was going to bring up the brother of Charlie and Wendy and the estranged relationship. I don't know what purpose it would serve to have him come in. John, again, would weigh in on this far better than I. To me, it would be a little bit of desperation for Georgia to have to rely on that when, again, I think there's a wealth of incriminating audio of Charlie just being Charlie. But there is a dynamic there that I think your viewer is correct in pointing out. There is another Adelson who has fallen out of favor with the family, who has been publicly concerned about the family's attitudes. And as Carm was just talking about, the hubris. I know that my experience looking at people and doing what I do tells me that people that live with that level of arrogance and pride have gotten away with other things along the way. And it just gradually gets bigger and bigger. The guy that was a robber was a burglar before that, and probably before that was a shoplifter. And thus the expression, pride comes before the fall. You just don't think you're going to be touched. You think you're Teflon coated. But I don't think the brother is going to be brought into this. I would be surprised.
I have one more statement. We had the honor and the pleasure of interviewing the prosecutor,
Georgia Kaplan.
Georgia Kaplan. And I have the chutzpah. I hope you know the expression chutzpah. Do you know?
I do.
Good. I have the chutzpah to deduct from that interview that Georgia will not bring in Dana before she deals with Charlie, because she's a very methodical, she's in no rush. She's not going anywhere. She has all the time she needs, and she's going to first finish dealing with Charlie before she brings in Dana.
John, Carm, is she correct?
I think Carm is correct. Absolutely. I think that it's going to be sequential. The Adelsons are going to be sequentially handled. And what Preston said really was interesting before, which is this is more or less the show, right? The other people, Rivera, Garcia, Magbanua, all guilty in their own right. That was more or less the preview, right? That was the appetizer. You're getting to the entree now. You're getting to the meat of the case. The most interesting parts of the case will be the various Adelson trials, whether it's 1, 2, or 3.
We got to rip through the rest of these comments. Real quick, though, Preston, do you expect for the Charlie Adelson trial, I mean, are people in Tallahassee so interested that they're going to go to this public courtroom and fill up that courtroom?
I don't know that they'll have a seat. I mean, don't you think the national media, national stories have been done about this? And so I would expect the media will probably take up most of the room. They don't have large courtrooms in this town. So, I'm certain there will be people, but I personally think it'll be friends and family of both sides of this that'll be in the courtroom with the media.
We've had a lot of people say that they thought it would be a much bigger national story than it's been, although 2020 and Dateline have done stories. Jackson Rip Holmes, or Jackson R.I.P. Holmes, I don't know which, his comment, great experts, and that is alluding to the great John Singer. So see, John, some people are kind. Says, I didn't know first degree carries a mandatory life sentence. This has to be incentive for Charlie Adelson to turn state's evidence, but you don't necessarily think so, right, John?
I don't. I think he's sitting there thinking about his victory and where he's going to go for dinner afterwards and who he's going to date and, whether he's going to do steroids, which he talks about on his the wiretaps, or he's going to smoke pot or whatever he's talking about, he's planning on doing afterwards.
Carm, I should probably...
John, does he pull an OJ and write a book? If he were to get acquitted, does he pull an OJ and write a book?
Is he literate? Do we know if he's literate? Oh, he's literate. I think he's literate.
What?
He'll definitely get a Twitter handle like OJ.
Right.
That's for sure. Maybe I should start taking steroids and smoking weed. From M_Christine, Harvey knew, at least after the fact, after the bump, Harvey definitely knew. Preston, you agree with that?
Oh, Harvey had to know something about all of this. There's no doubt in my mind. I personally think this was, look, Donna runs the office. Donna runs the family. Donna runs a lot of things. And I think she delegates to Charlie. And I think Charlie loves to have certain things delegated to him. I got this, Mom. Don't worry. Stay calm. And I think there was a degree of protection for Harvey for whatever the reason. But there's come on. That's one of those things that I think common sense just says there's no way that man is not aware of what happened.
Carm likes to weigh in on the elderly parents.
Yes,
go ahead, Carm.
Yes. I already compared myself to Donna minus the crime in a moment of honesty.
I might flip on Carm, but Carm would never flip on me. Go ahead, Carm.
No, but I was just thinking, I'm married 61 years, Preston, and to Joel's father. And I was amazed that we talked many times about this case, and we never talked about what kind of a relationship did Donna and Harvey have. Did they have one of those icy ones? Did they have a warm one? Did they have one like the proverbial Jewish husband who does everything the wife? This is previous generation.
I will tell you. She said jump, and he said how high. Preston, what kind of relationship do you think that the two had?
What do you think?
Donna and Harvey.
Oh, I think that would just be guessing on my part. I think if you just look at the personalities of the two of them, I think Harvey's very, very happy in his world, in his practice. And I think Donna runs about everything else.
Harvey is hoping he dies sooner than later. Let's put it that way. Richard says, Wendy had all the details on Dan. She was definitely the mastermind. Donna and Charlie just paid for it. John?
I don't think that's true. I think that Charlie fancies himself as the mastermind. He is the maestro, as Preston said, per his own license plate. I think that Donna complained incessantly, as did Wendy, about Tallahassee. Get Wendy the hell out of there. Charlie, as he always does, takes it upon himself. He knows some of the unsavory characters. He's in kind of two worlds, the orthodontist world or the periodontist world, and then he's in the nightclub, more or less, in that type of world too. So I think he said to his mother, I've got this. I've got a solution. I've got a person who can make this happen. I think Wendy was thrilled when she learned about it. Donna was fully on board. I think Harvey didn't know beforehand. He then found out. I think he was probably pretty angry. There was probably some really bad conversations that took place, but he clearly knew after the fact. But I think it was done of Charlie's volition, primarily for Donna, secondarily for Wendy.
If I was a periodontist, I would want to go to prison for life, so I'd never have to deal with that again. This is my favorite comment. It comes from Sarah. Sarah, I love you so much. Sarah with an H. She says, "You're being a little nicer to mom today, and I love fancy fiction." You were not here last time, but John, do you think I am being nicer to Carmela this time? Although she has...
It's dangerous. It's dangerous. It will become a habit, Joel.
Carm has frayed my nerves today. I'm not going to lie. I was paying about 9% of my mind was paying attention to this, and the other, whatever that would be, 91% was thinking about the viewer response, and they're going to just annihilate both of us.
No. You know what?
Carm, whatever you do,
I was grunting and
you're grunting. You're interrupting the show to ask if we're recording. But this is what happens when you have your mother, who's almost 83, as your co-host. Her birthday's next week, by the way. And by the way, anyone who wants to be part of our newsletter, make sure you drop your email into the comment section. 2 more quick comments. Steve Karras, a great guy who I've met through this podcast, he said, and Preston, this is directed to you. The comment is, God, the Adelsons really hated Tallahassee. It can't be that bad. Preston, is Tallahassee that bad that Donna wanted to kill Dan because of it?
Obviously, no. But Tallahassee is Tallahassee is not what most people think of when they think of Florida. It was described very aptly by a whole lot of people before me. Tallahassee is probably better understood as being more like South Georgia than it is like Florida. It's a very tree-lined community. It's a small town that revolves around its universities, as I mentioned. It is not a booming metropolis in any way, shape, or form. There's nothing fast that happens here. It does have a surprisingly high crime rate, and a lot of people will be surprised to know that the highest violent crime rate in Florida actually has been in Tallahassee most of the last decade.
Wow.
But what happened here is an outlier. This was a plotted assassination.
And in Preston, I wasn't going to ask you about this, but it just triggered in my mind. Ghislaine Maxwell is now a resident of Tallahassee. I mean, that's kind of crazy. You got a lot of high-profile criminals now.
Seeing Ghislaine Maxwell moved into Tallahassee was certainly interesting.
We did a podcast with a guy that slept with her. A guy named Williams.
No. He claims that
he claims he slept with her.
We couldn't independently verify it.
A final comment and then final thoughts, and then we got to wrap up. The studio is going to kick us out. This one comes from not Mark Zuckerberg, but Mark Kuckerberg. His comment, I love this one. I can relate. Having in-laws, getting divorced is terrifying. Glad I never married. Kids are grown. No one wants to off me. Thank God. Mark, you're a lucky man. Final thoughts. Preston, what comes next? What are you looking for here?
I'm going to be fascinated to see what more Georgia Cappleman and the state of Florida have as it relates to evidence with the Adelson case. And I say Adelson case because I do believe more is coming. But I'm just going to be curious. Again, as a former grand jury, there is more than enough evidence that I would have recommended a probable cause affidavit on that one. And with Donna, what I've heard so far, I think it warrants a presentment as well. But that's what I'm interested in is if they have more.
Carm, before we get to John.
You know what I was thinking? It's way projected in the future, but it will be a little bit difficult to select a jury now.
John?
No. I agree. I mean, I think it's getting more and more difficult because more and more trials have taken place on this case, and jurors are theoretically not supposed to be very familiar with it. There was one juror who was interviewed, I can't remember on which podcast, in the aftermath of this trial, who said that they had heard about the case in the very embryonic stages, but hadn't followed it closely. So it may be slightly more difficult to find jurors who are completely ignorant as to the facts, because again, it's been going on for so long. There's been so many trials, so much media coverage, certainly in Tallahassee on it.
And John, your final thoughts. What's next?
My final thought is more Carmela has this fascination with Harvey Adelson and his involvement or lack thereof. And I think it's very interesting fascination in the sense that we know so little about him. And I'm hoping something comes forward into the public domain regarding Harvey just to satiate Carmela's curiosity.
Thank you.
About
Thank
what
you.
Harvey knew. That's my final thought on it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And I have a final question for Preston. Preston, is this the strangest, most odd show you've ever been a part of?
Let me think of, yes.
Does Carmela have a future in radio?
In radio? Yeah, perhaps.
She needs to stop the grunting. So,
Today I was
but
grunting. I couldn't help.
if you ever want us on radio, Carm will be happy to do it. But I'm teeing up a phenomenal guest here, John Singer, for you.
Hey, I was kind of hoping that you might have Steve send me a hookup for an email address there. I'd love to have John on the program to talk about this. Obviously, we'll be discussing it more and more. And on a personal note, I really, really hope Charlie Adelson finds my radio program. He'd love it.
Hey, listen, they listen to radio in prison and they have plenty of time. So listen, Preston especially, I cannot thank you enough because I didn't even know you were going to be on my show till I saw your face and I had to ask you your name. So shout out again to Steve Cohen, who helps us produce this. John Singer, you're a brilliant legal mind, a mensch, and a Pats fan, even though Tom Brady lives down here these days. But thank you guys. We will circle back and do this again real soon. The viewers want more. So thanks so much. Carm, you have a final?
Yes.
This is classic. Just every time we wrap.
You forgot to say I'll send it to you when it's ready.
Carm, it goes without saying. I don't have to tell them everything.
Okay.
So guys, we appreciate it. Preston, before I let you go,
Thank you.
This is legally binding since John is here. Despite Carmela's antics today, will you come back as a guest?
I'd be happy to. I'm humbled that you would ask.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Thank you. Love you,
Thank you.
America. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.